Have you ever noticed that the deeper you think, the thinner the room becomes? That as your questions grow sharper, the conversation around you softens into small talk? It's not a glitch in your personality. It's a pattern as old as thought itself. Societies admire intelligence in the abstract, awards on the wall, quotes on the timeline, yet flinch when intelligence walks into the room and asks for honesty. Not because deep thinkers are cruel, but because they illuminate what most of us learned to keep in shadow. So let's ask the real question. Why does depth make people uneasy? And is there a way to carry a deep mind without becoming a permanent exile? Start at the beginning, your beginning. When you stand next to someone who can run faster, you don't feel attacked, you feel wind. When you meet someone with more money, you might feel envy, but your identity survives. Strength and status live outside the skin. But thinking? Thinking lives where identity sleeps. If I challenge your ideas, I'm touching the architecture of who you believe you are. That's not a debate, that feels like surgery. Psychologists have a simple phrase for this: self-threat. New ideas don't only compete with old ones, they tug at the threads that hold a self together. That's why a calm, careful question can feel in the body like a shove. And the body reacts before the mind can explain. Heart rate up, shoulders tense, eyes searching for the nearest exit, even if the exit is just changing the subject. But there's another layer: status. In private, truth can feel intimate. In groups, truth can feel humiliating. We perform for one another more than we admit. A subtle correction in front of a crowd isn't just information, it's a social earthquake. And so we learn a quiet rule: keep things simple in public, keep things honest in private, and keep things comfortable everywhere. There's also the engine of culture itself. Schools teach curiosity, but reward compliance. Workplaces praise originality, but fund predictability. Platforms amplify engagement, and engagement prefers conflict over nuance, heat over light. Depth takes time, and in the attention economy, time is the one luxury no algorithm can afford. So the deep thinker begins to drift, not out of pride, out of gravity. And yet, there is another lineage, older than the algorithm and larger than the lecture hall, a lineage that says, the task is not to win the argument, but to wake the mind. In the East, tantric sages broke the habit of ordinary seeing. Saraha, the arrow-making yogi, sang that truth is not in the temple or the book, but in the unguarded moment. Look with naked awareness. Tilopa told his student Naropa, don't invite, don't reject, don't grasp, rest. This wasn't passive. It was the fiercest discipline, to meet reality before the story forms. In Kashmir, Abhinavagupta mapped consciousness not as a courtroom of right and wrong, but as a living light, a spanda, a subtle vibration. For him, wisdom wasn't a ladder, it was a widening. You don't climb to truth. You relax into it. And on the road between myth and monastery, Padmasambhava whispered a paradox into the Tibetan mountains. The demons you fight are often your own masks. If you listen closely, you'll hear a resonance with the West. Machiavelli warned that people prefer the familiar lie over the useful truth, but only because truth demands change. Spinoza said freedom is understanding necessity. Reality becomes less frightening when you stop arguing with its laws. Nietzsche dared us to outgrow the comforts of borrowed virtue, and Simone Weil sharpened the blade. Attention is the rarest form of generosity. All of them, in their own dialects, agreed with Tilopa, meet what is. So why does depth isolate? Because depth is a refusal to look away, a refusal to speak in a way that makes lies feel safe. It isn't cruelty, it's devotion. But if devotion leads to distance, what then? How do you keep your mind clear and your heart connected? First, change your posture from convince to invite. Truth is not a product to push, it's a temperature to set. Ask questions that let others keep their dignity. Trade the mic drop for the lantern. The most persuasive sentence in any language might be, "What would make this safer to explore?" Second, build rooms that fit your voice. Some spaces are designed for volume, not signal. Don't blame the ocean for being wet. Build a boat, a reading group, a quiet newsletter, a long-form channel. The Tantric masters knew this. Gorakhnath trained in caves, not because caves are holy, but because caves give you back your own echo. Make a modern cave. Third, learn the craft of compression without the sin of distortion. Nuance matters. So does entry. Think of Abhinavagupta's insight, the way Stoicism packages suffering. Simple on arrival, endless once inside. What you resist owns you. That's a doorway. Once people walk through, offer the cathedral. Fourth, practice the lion's gaze. The lion looks without flinching. In Tantra, this means meeting sensation, fear, envy, confusion, without throwing a story on top. In philosophy, it's the same. Sit with the thought until the heat cools and the shape appears. This is not detachment. It is intimacy without panic. Fifth, choose belonging over audience. You don't need 1,000,000 casual passers-by. You need 1,000 co-pilots. Laleshwari, Lal Dead, wandered the Kashmir Valley, singing riddles to those who could receive them. Her circle was not large, it was exact. Aim for exact. Now, a harder truth, sometimes the isolation you feel is not punishment. It is training. A thinning of distractions so that your seeing can grow precise. Even Socrates, wandering the Athenian markets, knew this ache. The price of the unexamined life is paid in comfort. The price of the examined life is paid in company. You don't get both every day, but isolation is not the final scene. Communion is. Look again at the pattern. Every thinker we call ahead of their time was secretly on time for someone else. A book is a slow conversation. A tradition is a long table. Saraha sang to blacksmiths. Stoicism survived the empire because it fit the kitchen as well as the Senate. Your work will find its people if you write it like a bridge, not a badge. And what about power? The West teaches how to acquire it. Tantra teaches how to transmute it. Power without awareness becomes theater. Awareness without power becomes withdrawal. The synthesis is quiet strength, the capacity to hold a difficult truth without weaponizing it. Machiavelli might call that prudence. Abhinavagupta would call it Shakti, guided by Sit, energy, guided by awareness. Here's a practice to carry into the next conversation. Name the layer. Are we debating facts, values, or identity? Move gently as the layer deepens. Offer a joint inquiry. Shall we test this idea together? Changes the geometry from adversaries to co-investigators. Touch the body. One breath everyone can feel. One image everyone can see. Let's pause 10 seconds and notice what tightens. Tantric sages would call this returning to the field. Leave with a gift, not a verdict, a question. Something that grows in the other person's pocket after you've left. And when you're alone again, because you will be, remember what the lineages agree on. Clarity is a kind of love. It refuses to abandon reality, and it refuses to abandon people. It waits, it listens, it speaks when speaking will serve, and it is silent when silence will keep the door open. The world doesn't always welcome deep thinkers at first contact. That's all right. Be patient with the century. Be patient with the room. Be patient with yourself. Your task is not to be understood by everyone. Your task is to understand so well that understanding itself becomes hospitable. So if you've felt the strange loneliness of a mind that won't stop at the surface, know this: you are not broken. You're early, and early is a sacred place where the road is quiet, the air is clean, and the next light is still yours to hang. Tell me, where has your depth cost you, and where has it saved you? I read everything, and if you're building a life around these questions, East and West, mind and mystery, hit subscribe. We have caves to build and cities to light.